Welcome to another episode of the Soothing Semantics Podcast. I am your host, Rafi Pinsky. Make sure to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, leave your comments. Of course, for all of your real estate needs in South Florida, you know where to go. Make sure to check out my Instagram page at Rafi the Realtor. Sign up for my weekly newsletter, and I'd be enthralled. I'd be extremely happy to help you. Without further ado, episode 222. I'm not wearing any shoes. I'm not that good of a rapper, but anyhow, Mr. Pollard, Alec Pollard from the Insightful Nomad YouTube channel. He's a travel vlogger, an Israeli, a fellow Heb, and it is really a pleasure to be speaking with you on today's episode. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, Rafi, thank you so much for inviting me. And if it makes you feel good, I'm not wearing any shoes either. So, you know,
There we go.
just
There we
uh,
go.
just just hanging out here. It's all good.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm wearing my shorts and flip flops. It's nice. It's great. It's easy.
Yeah. Well, whatever's under you gave it away because nobody would know what's going on under the camera. But yeah.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So thanks for coming. I wanted to just quickly get into a little bit about your background, right? Say even how you ended up in Israel, because initially you mentioned that, like me, you were born in New York. So the floor is yours.
No, I grew up in Israel. My parents made Aliyah to Israel in the 70s
Hmm.
and got married in Israel in Jerusalem. And then they moved to the US for a few years to make some money and kind of like settle some of the stuff that they wanted to settle before moving back to Israel. So I've been in Israel since I'm 6 years old. Grew up here, did all the normal stuff here. I was in the military. I was in an infantry unit in Golani actually. It's a combat
Hmm.
medic. And after I studied, I worked as a journalist for 5.5 years at I-24 News, which some of you may know, in the English channel. Did a lot of stuff there. I started off as a producer. I was a correspondent. I was an anchor. I was a bunch of things. Covered a lot of conflicts, like the 2018 war with Hamas, 2021 war with Hamas, 5 election cycles. Interviewed a bunch of top brass people here in Israel, including a bunch of people on the street. So got a wide perspective from that. Um, and yeah, after doing that for a long time, I got a bit tired of it, of all the conflict and all the craziness of Israel, and decided that I wanted to move on. And then I had to decide what I wanted to do when I was moving on, which was either go work somewhere else in the media. And I kind of like, I don't know if I was disillusioned from the media, but I think the media has its limitations, which we can talk about later if you want.
Hmm.
That's a lot of people talk about the fake news and the this news and the that news, and there's a lot to unpack there. But let's just say I had a bit of a media exhaustion, and when I was traveling in Indonesia, actually, I was in Bali, and I rented a motorbike there, and I was driving around, and I thought, wow, I can make some really great content from this place. Thinking as a kind of a content creator, because when I was in the news, I used to make TV pieces where I would film, interview, show stuff. And I was also watching some travel vlogs and things like that. And I just thought to myself, I have all the skills to make this content. I could probably make better content than a lot of the content I'm seeing online, which is going super viral. And yeah, the bug just kind of stuck in my head. And I decided one day, that's it. I'm quitting. I'm starting the vlog. I'm traveling. I'm starting the vlog. And if it doesn't work, then I have my whole life to work in an office, So it's kind of like nothing to lose. Have some of those savings. I set aside a certain amount of money that I can kind of blow through until I stop, and started traveling and making videos, learning how to make videos as a vlogger, which is a different experience to doing it as a journalist. When you have a little camera, action camera with you, it's a different experience. You capture different moments. That you can't capture as a journalist with a big camera and a microphone that kind of creates this artificial situation. And I really love doing that.
Hmm.
And I would say that, yeah, my first big viral video was the one that I did in Egypt. And that was basically, I saw the group there's Facebook groups in Israel like Lovers of Sinai, which is a very big group, has about 250,000 people for all those who go to Sinai, which Israelis love going to Sinai. As you might know, you just drive across the border from southern Israel. It's safe. It's, Bedouin Arabs when they're used to seeing Israelis. Going to Cairo or something like that was always considered a lot more, extreme. And there was a group for that as well, Lovers of Egypt, as opposed to Lovers of Sinai, which was a lot smaller, just a couple thousand people. And there was a period, and this was, of course, before October 7th, 2023, that was starting to take off a little bit. More and more people were going to Egypt. There were already, numbers you could exchange of guides and this and where, like, the information was already flowing and people were already doing it. So, I decided that I really wanted to go. The country is very interesting to me. It has a tremendous history, as we all know. And then, I said, okay, I'm going to make a vlog from Egypt. And then the question was sort of, all right, what am I going to do about the whole Israel thing, Because it might not be totally safe everywhere you go around in Egypt to say it from Israel. And then B, surely that's going to kind of dominate the vlog, no? I mean, it's going to keep coming up and it's going to keep being this and that. So what do I do? Like, what do I do? Do I just ignore it? Do I just this, that? And yeah, at some point I decided, okay, that's interesting, right? That will be the subject of the vlog. So I decided to call it, what happens when an Israeli visits Egypt? That would actually be the subject of the vlog, like an Israeli in Egypt, not just visiting Egypt. And did that vlog, had some interesting moments there, some better, some worse, which we can talk about. Was very, I would say, overall positive experience, very cool experience going to Egypt. And that video did go like super viral. It's at over 1 million views now. Generated a lot of responses. And okay, I finished Egypt. Obviously, I uploaded all those videos after I left Egypt and not while I was there. Finished Egypt and I went a bit to South America, and then my views started to go down significantly. And also, October 7th happened while I was in South America. So I was kind of like deciding what to do. And I did also make some videos from Israel as a vlogger, sort of like travel vlog kind of style, raw style, right? Not too over edited, but kind of the real experience that you're getting, trying to convey that to people. And I just decided to try to kind of replicate what I did in Egypt and other places, in the sense of going to countries where, as an Israeli, you might not be that welcome, or you can't even go unless you have a foreign passport, which was the case, for example, when I went to Indonesia. And yeah, just did a bunch of these countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Morocco, and finally Saudi Arabia, that I visited. And that, I think, was basically kind of the thing that really set my vlog apart from other vlogs out there. Vlogs by international vlogs or by Israelis or by anyone. It's kind of like a unique thing, right? So I invented a genre, it's called that way. Because in the travel vlogging sphere, a lot of people are doing a lot of basically the same things. They're hitting the same spots around the world, telling, there's certain things that work in the travel vlog. Most dangerous neighborhood, biggest slum, this guy tried to scam me, worst train journey in the world, what can $20 get you? And then, like, there's things that people are doing the same things over and over
Like
again.
the Drew Pinsky style. So
Yeah, he's one of many, and
yeah.
But even, I'm just saying that, okay, like there are less and less people who are actually doing new things and going to new places. I'm not saying I always did that, but I can just say that, yeah, I mean, I did that genre,
Yeah, like
sort of
a lot
invented.
of like off the beaten path destinations, obviously.
Among others, I did have some of those, but some of them weren't off the beaten path, because, like, in Egypt, I also went to pyramids and I went to Aswan and whatever, but it was just kind of different because it was from a perspective of a person who's supposedly not supposed to be there. Same thing in Saudi Arabia, same thing in all those places. So that was, an experience, and probably kind of like what set my blog apart from others. But it created a lot of comments and things, and interesting live streams that I would do with a bunch of people and all that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I stand now. I'm now back in Israel. I don't know how much more I'm going to travel at this point, but still making vlogs, and here we are in the midst of a war as well.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing that you have gone to these countries that a lot of people would consider very hostile towards Jews, you know?
Yeah, Jews, sometimes Jews, more Israelis. That's kind of if you say you're Jewish, maybe it's a little bit different, but Israeli is kind of like the red line for them, they're not willing to accept it. But depends. It depends. I would say for sure that Israel is the country out of all the countries in the world that has the most, let's say they draw a direct link between you as a citizen and all the conflict that's going on around the country. So, I did a lot of traveling throughout my life. I never saw someone, get aggressive with a Chinese person because, you know, they're doing whatever they're doing, or the Uyghurs, the Muslim Uyghurs in West China, or someone, get aggressive with a Russian guy, just a random Russian traveler because of the war in Ukraine, or a random Syrian because of this, or a random Palestinian after October 7th. It's like kind of like a unique thing in the entire globe that if you are from Israel, then all the conflict that's going on around Israel is 100% Israel's fault, and B, you're also to blame as an Israeli. Also, I've seen a lot of vlogs of Americans going to places like Iraq, Afghanistan, places where the US as a government had involvement, and people might have some type of animosity towards the state for actions that they took, potentially. But I've never seen any case where someone lashed out at, for example, an American for being in these places, even if those places were impacted by America, whatever you may think about it, for to hear or to hear. I had quite a few of those as an Israeli, not just as a vlogger, but also before, where people, they immediately start asking like very aggressive, inquisitive questions about what's going on in Israel and the government policy and things like that. But in Egypt, I had a bunch of people who just straight up, like there was the scene where I got kicked off a motorbike when I said I was from Israel, and that went
I remember
super.
that.
Yeah,
I
so
saw that.
they cut that up, and then someone put it up on Twitter, and it got like 3 million views within a day. And then I asked to take it down because it's my content, right? And then it popped up somewhere else and got another 3 million. And then it popped up on Instagram and got another. Like every time it went up, it just went super viral and filled with like millions of people just saying, yeah, kick him off and this, and he deserves it. And that's nothing compared to what they do to Palestine. Like it really got them in a rage of ecstasy over such
Oh
a
wow. So
stupid.
people loved it. People loved
They
it.
absolutely love it, and of course, it's such a petty thing that doesn't help anybody. It's a completely useless whatever. But yeah, I mean, I had that. I also had some off-screen moments also where people got aggressive, but I also had a lot of good interactions. And anyone who saw the vlog can see that. A lot of the comments I got from people were them saying that, well, it's only because you went to touristic places where they're used to seeing tourists, but that's not true. I also went to non-touristic places in my vlog. I mean, I went to, I went to the garbage city, the slum of Cairo, where the city where the garbage collectors live. They recycle the garbage from different places. In the city, it's very poor. It's Coptic though, which is different. It's a Christian area where there's a famous church there and all that. Talked to some people there. When I was in Luxor, I went to kind of like on the other side of the river, which is not where all the hotels are. Had a bit there. In the street of Aswan, like, so I had also interactions in more random, not, let's say, controlled environments, so to speak.
The Copts are, would you say, more friendly towards Israelis? Do they not care as much, or are they just as Egyptian as everyone else?
Look, I don't know. I can say from if you take my experience both from Egypt and from Indonesia, then in Indonesia, I met a lot of very pro-Israeli Christians. Indonesia has close to 300 million people. So they only have 10-15% Christian, but that's a lot of people. That's like 30 million people. And through them, I had a whole experience in Indonesia where I went to this school, actually an Islamic school, where they're very tolerant and they sing songs in Hebrew, among others, which was a pretty crazy experience. And the head of the school was inspired by the Israeli kibbutz, and he wants to make the place kind of like self-sufficient or something like that. So I made two, like it appears in my main Indonesia video, and then a secondary one that I made that. So that those were Muslims, but there were also a bunch of Christians that do group tours to Israel. from Indonesia, large groups that come all the time. I mean, I went to meet one of the pastors there, and he says, "Oh, this is my friend. He's been to Israel 15 times." You know, so I definitely think there is something where if you are a Christian minority in a Muslim majority country where you often face various problems, that you might be a little bit more sympathetic to Israel. I mean, there's a similar thing also when I was in Morocco with the Amazigh, who are Berbers, which is the original population of North Africa before the Arabs conquered it in the 8th century, where they experienced, like, let's say, a very much erasure and domination of their culture over the years. And some people are kind of resentful of that and had a lot of Jewish neighbors and stuff who are also of those people, like Berber, North African indigenous people who became Jewish. And a lot of those people were positive towards Israel. And my Morocco videos are some of the videos that got more, let's say, positive reactions in the comments than some of the other ones. So I do think that issue of when you are a minority in these countries and you're feeling it yourself, some of the problems, that you might be more sympathetic to Israel, but it's not something you can say out in the open. I mean, to be a Coptic Christian in Egypt and support Israel is like tantamount to a death sentence. Yeah, I mean, it's not realistic. But I can just say when I was there and I went to the church there and I met, some guys and it was fine. And then one of them became my guide in the neighborhood and things like that. Some Coptic Christians who left Egypt are very outspoken against the things they face there. One of the most prominent is a guy named Raymond Ibrahim, who's a researcher in the U.S., who's, written probably the leading writer scholar right now on persecution of Christians in Muslim countries in the world. So, there's, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say because it depends, but I do think that, yeah, I mean, if you meet Christian minorities in some of these places, they sometimes are a little bit more sympathetic to Israel.
Okay. Yeah, there's a guy, Coptic Kapara. That's how he goes by. He's not obviously not a Jewish guy. Have you seen that guy?
Yeah. No, but he's like an Instagram.
He's a very, very pro-Israel, pro-Jewish. He's an American, but he's a Coptic Christian. I believe his parents are from Egypt. So he's very pro-Israel. He's unapologetic about it.
Look, there's something here. There's something here that's interesting, which is that in general, when you go into the online world, it's much more negative and aggressive. Like, it's funny how when I all these countries I went to, when I was there, I was in a much more positive mindset than when I left. Because when I left and uploaded the videos, then I started to get all the hate in the online. But when I was actually there, I kind of had a different feel, even though I didn't always say I was from Israel, because it depended on the circumstance and if I felt it was okay to do it or not, like in Egypt. But also in Egypt, there were a lot of people I told that was from Israel in certain circumstances. And, it was a decent experience. But now when I look back at it and I see all the comments and all those, the video being uploaded, and it's like now I have a negative experience in my mindset because of what happened after in the online. Because there's a certain group of people out there who just don't spend time online. They're not on their phones all day. They're not this older people usually. They're not embroiled in this, and they're just like kind of like living their life and whatever. So it's a little bit different. The online world, it's all attacks and aggression and negativity.
100%. It's a weird thing because the people online are still people having experiences, but their experiences are shaped by what they see online. And the older people who aren't on the internet, their experiences are shaped largely because they don't interact with Jews really in Egypt nowadays. But if they did, like yourself, they're meeting you, what issue would they have with you? You're nice to them, they're nice to you. They just it's a weird thing.
Well, that's what I expect. Kind of, that's I mean, people say I'm naive to expect that, but my expectation is the way I treat any person around the world. If I see a person, I don't care where he's from. First of all, I want to be nice to him and interact with him and see. Actually, if he comes from a place that I've never been to before or that is actually hostile to me, I'm actually more interested in meeting the person and may even give him more of a benefit of the doubt than another person, because I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity. Like, the guy who picked me off the motorbike, because he probably never, wouldn't imagine that some tourist in the middle of Cairo is from Israel. It's like the last thing he expected. if I was a motorbike driver and I don't know, some guy from North Korea got on my motorbike, I'd really want to know something about what's going on with this guy. I wouldn't be immediately like, your government does no. It's
Sure.
but they have a hard time making that bridge, unfortunately, and it's only gotten worse post October 7th with kind of the let's say the online hatred that exists. But I think I also, I broke through to some people, which is nice. I also got some nice comments, and I made a follow-up video with an Egyptian guy who saw my video and liked it, and he lives abroad mostly. He has a foreign passport, and he actually came to Israel, and we made a video together, a reverse Egyptian and Israel video that did pretty
I
well as
I
well.
believe I saw that. I believe I saw that. I did.
Yeah, and that was also, that got a lot of good people love that video. He got a lot of attacks as well. Oh, how'd you go and do this and that?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm happy I did what I did, and I think it had some positive impact on some people. But I don't feel that much like I want to do more of that. No,
You feel like you don't?
no. Going to
Uh-huh.
like enemy countries, no. Just going other
Okay.
places, yeah. Going to it because
No.
there were some people say, oh, you should come to Tunisia, you should come to I don't know, a bunch of stuff were thrown out there, like options. And I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to go and hide and skulk half the time and be scared, and then when you do say this, you can potentially meet someone who's like hostile and aggressive, and then have all the comments where people will attack you and all this. It's not like they make you not want to do it, and it's also kind of one of the comments that I get in my videos that really annoys me, and that there's no way to overcome this, is this idea. Whenever I visit Muslim countries, and I try to show some level of coexistence as a positive, I want to highlight positive things, and then you can take away those positive things and be like, oh look, so I went to Albania, which is majority Muslim, and I showed that in the Holocaust they saved Jews, which is a story that some people know. I think even Albert Einstein spent some time there. When he fled, I went to a mosque there where they say Jews were allowed to pray inside when they were hiding and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Morocco. I showed some of the synagogues, some of the coexistence that existed over there. And one of the most common responses I got is, "You see, look how well we treated you, and look what you're doing to the Palestinians now." That's one of whenever I try to show that, instead of saying, oh look, here's something positive, and then maybe saying something positive in return, very often that was the response, and it makes you not want to do it, because it makes you want to tell these people, it's like, no, the fact that I'm showing something positive doesn't mean that the Jews were treated so wonderfully throughout their entire history in Muslim countries. They were dhimmi, a
100%.
subjugated minority, faced all kinds of persecutions. When I was in Morocco, I wanted to go to Oujda, which is a city in East Morocco where there was a big massacre in 1948 because there were some Jews who wanted to leave and go to Israel. And they were accused of like trying to subvert and plot to kill Muslims and harm Muslims, something that just wasn't true. And they killed them and they slaughtered them and whatever. And I ended up not doing that because I was like, I don't want to get into this kind of very negative turf, you know? But
Right.
on the other hand, when you do the positive things, then they don't reciprocate very often. They don't like say, oh, we also saw that in Israel, people can coexist. It's not all negative. So you kind of lose. Like if you show positive stuff, then very often it's like, look how tolerant we are and look how intolerant you are. And if you show
Right.
something negative to say the truth, it's like, okay, yes, Jews lived in Muslim empires and stuff as a subjugated minority. Sometimes they got along with their neighbors, and there's some nice stories, which is great, and we can take something positive for that. But they were still a subjugated minority and faced all kinds of persecutions. Then it's, how dare you? You in Israel have done 100 times worse to the Palestinians. How dare you criticize us, and so forth. So it's I don't feel like any of those modes really, for a huge amount of the people, actually like changes their perception in a positive way. Gets it. It's also a thing because I don't know even if that was my goal, right? Like I started as a travel vlog. I did this Egypt video. didn't even know what I was trying to do with that video besides make a travel vlog. And then, I decided to bring in the Israeli angle, and it became what it became. And then I saw that worked. So I went to other places. So like, I don't even know if some people call me a peace activist or whatever. Like, I don't even call myself that. I'm a vlogger. But it would have been nice if, after putting in all that effort and money and time and danger, maybe a little bit, that people would appreciate it a little bit more and say, okay, we're all people, and I'm glad you visited, instead of don't ever come back again. And if I'd seen you, I would have, knocked you off and whatever.
Yeah. Well, you're at the end of the day, you're doing the right thing. You're coming from a place of peace. And I've seen a bunch of your videos, and you can only do what you can do. It's disappointing though. It's disappointing when you come with a good heart and people don't reciprocate. But that's unfortunately what the case if you're Jewish, especially Israeli. It's just what it is. So leading up to my next question is, how has the travel vlogging shaped your view? Now, we covered it a lot, but I want to ask, in terms of October 7th, how has it shaped your view on what we're doing in terms of Israel waging these wars? Because clearly, as you mentioned for the last few minutes, it's not exactly putting us in the greatest position in terms of how people view us, especially in the Muslim countries. So, do you feel that despite all the hate, everything we're doing is still necessary? It's a pretty broad question, but
Everything, I don't know if
I'm not
everything,
saying,
but
yeah.
I support Israel. I don't necessarily support this government or its prime minister. But, I think, and I say this more in my live streams than in my vlogs. And my live streams is kind of where I have the more political discussions and I allow people to ask questions and I answer. And it's interesting because it brings people from both sides because of the places I've been with my videos. So it kind of sometimes attracts, Egyptians and Moroccans and Saudis come into the chat and people. So it's an interesting chat, and I like having debate. I don't like it when people come in and they just start getting super aggressive and whatever. But if people come, even if they're not supportive of us, if they come and they want to have a discussion, I think it's good. I don't want to be in an echo chamber, So I like that, and that's great. My view of the conflict, basically, and it's funny that you said that you were supposed to interview Einat Wilf and she was sick, because I'm a big fan of hers, and I agree with her when she says, look, there's an objection to the concept of Jews having their own country, being self-determined in their own country, and I think that is kind of what fuels everything. I think now, with all the talk about Iran, we can go back to a pivotal year in the region that kind of shows how this concept plays out, which is 1979, a year where you had one country on one side that for almost 30 years, 25 years, basically had a position that there's no such thing as Israel, we'll never accept Israel, and we're going to try to destroy Israel, or at least put a ring around it and threaten it and make alliances and bring in weapons and all that. And that country was Egypt, right? So, they invaded after Israel declared independence in 48. Then they started arming these Fedayeen in Gaza, which was under Egyptian control, sent them into Israel to commit attacks, close the Straits of Tiran and all that in 67, Yom Kippur War, 73. Of course, they have their whole own narrative of that, which I saw when I visited the museum in Cairo. But let's say they had a certain policy, and that led, among other things, and you can blame part of it on Israel, that's fine, but still, it's undeniable that we had a bunch of wars between Israel and Egypt. They were very destructive to both sides. And as soon as Egypt changed their approach to, we want to make peace with Israel, Sadat, we want to make peace with Israel, flew to Israel, to Jerusalem, went to the Knesset, everything, started a negotiation mediated by the US. We had a deal. Israel withdrew from Sinai Peninsula, signed a peace agreement, and since then, no wars between Israel and Egypt. They don't love us. I'm not under any illusions that they do. But okay, we don't have wars. We don't have any wars. That's from one
Can I
side.
say,
Yeah.
Alec, can I just ask, not to move away, just a quick thing, just kind of like a yes or no. Do you think though, and I fully agree that they don't love us, But do you think it's from the idea that the juice isn't worth the squeeze in terms of fighting us? Or do you think it's more, oh, we gave them the Sinai, so they're happy? Do you think it, I think the Sinai option worked clearly, but do you think it's just because we were successful in our military campaigns?
Look, it's an interesting question. I talked about this a lot, about the whole peace process between Israel and Egypt and what I saw at the museum, at the 73 War Museum in Egypt. And I'm also writing a book, by the way, which some of my followers know, which is about my travels in these countries and what I learned and so forth, where I unpack this issue specifically quite in detail. And I have a lot to say about it. I'm going to get back to it in 1 second, but I just still want to make that comparison between the two things that happened in 79. One country wanted to destroy Israel, was engaged in all of these activities. We had a lot of wars. A bunch of people suffered, made peace with Israel. Since then, we have no wars. I think we can all agree on that.
Right.
Even with all the problems. Another country had a peace agreement with Israel, had direct flights to Israel, sold oil to Israel, had no problem with Israel. That country was Iran. New government came in, Islamic Republic, very quickly decided Israel is the enemy, started arming proxies around Israel, calling for Israel's destruction, then building nuclear weapons, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are, we have a war between us and them. So it shows that you as a country, you have a choice. You can say you want to destroy Israel and engage in hostile activities against Israel to various degrees, and then we are embroiled in war. Or you can not make that decision and we're not at war, which is the case between Israel and Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Saudi, UAE, and so forth. Now, back to your question about Egypt, it's a crucial question because what I learned, and I knew this before I went to Egypt because I'd done my research and I was a journalist before and so forth, that in Egypt's view, they won the war in 73. Yeah, the Yom Kippur War, what's known.
I also remember seeing this video. I've watched a nice amount of your content, Alec. Just so you know.
That's a that's
The,
yeah.
yeah, no, so I remember this because I was trying to remember I'm trying to remember if I saw it. I don't think anyone else that I recall posted about this. It was mentioning, I think, that they destroyed a lot more armor and tanks than they actually did, right? Was that the consensus?
Yeah,
They
so according to the Egyptians, they won the war.
they won the war, right?
They won the war. And I knew before I went there that, for example, there are two suburbs of Cairo called 6th of October, which is the date of the commencement of the war, and 10th of Ramadan, which is the Muslim date of the commencement of the war. You don't name a town after a date. First of all, naming a town after the date of the commencement of the war is a bit strange, I think. I don't think it's something Israel would do even if they won a war, but you certainly don't do that for a war that you drew or lost. So that's the first thing. And I knew about this. But when I went there, I saw it like, a lot more with my own eyes, where they constantly use words like victory, liberation. They, repeatedly claimed that they liberated the Sinai Peninsula, meaning they took it by force, when in reality, we returned it to them as part of a comprehensive peace agreement. And that happened many years after the war concluded. I mean, the war ended in 73. The last part of Sinai was evacuated in 82. It's almost a decade later. So this is just not true. I mean, you're saying that basically the tanks rolled in, the Egyptian tanks, and liberated this land, rather than the fact that you negotiated with Israel and got it back as part of an agreement. And when people were talking to me about this scene that I made in my video, or the continuation video that I made where I kind of unpacked this whole process, they were constantly saying, "You really think Israel would give back the Sinai if we hadn't defeated you in the war? Like, why would Israel do that? Like, they can't."
By the way, it's a very good question. I asked that too.
Well, that's what some people who are more on the right in Israel say. But like in their mindset, it's basically, it's inconceivable, the idea that Israel would make such a concession unless they were so obliterated in the war that they supposedly had no choice.
It's hard for the Arab mind to understand the Jewish mercy, even if it was effective. The concept to Arabs of giving up a swath of land after victory, especially much larger than Israel, just doesn't compute in their minds. They don't operate that way.
Right. So again, I mean, there are different versions of this. So there was one guy who wrote in the comment, he wrote in the comment section, he says, look, I know it's not exactly like they taught us in school in Egypt that we defeated you in a couple of days and liberated the Sinai, but you have to admit that Israel wouldn't return the Sinai if you really had won the war. So there are people who believe this to different degrees, but there's an agreement that essentially Egypt inflicted such a blow on Israel that Israel was essentially forced to its knees, kind of, and to return the Sinai Peninsula. And it brings me back to the issue of what you said about the peace agreement, which is I'm not sure that the Egyptians would have agreed to make peace unless they had this kind of false victory that they could hoist as a trophy to kind of retrieve their pride and make peace with Israel on equal terms. So if you go into the Egyptian mindset, is Israel, with the help of the colonial powers, attacked Egypt in this kind of cowardly attack in 67, took it unawares, and okay, they got us that time, but we returned the favor in 73. And because we're this magnanimous, peace-loving nation, we agreed to extend our hands to Israel after we defeated them, kind of. Something like that. That's a story that the Egyptian can grudgingly accept, even if not love, because they still don't really accept Israel. The idea that they lost also that war, despite having, early successes, which are undeniable. The crossing of the Suez Canal was a very impressive military achievement. I said so in the video. They put Israel on the back foot. Also in Syria, Israel was in a very precarious situation. But in the end, Israel did turn the tide. And, by the end of the war, we're on the other side of the Suez. And the third army of Egyptians was on the east side, surrounded, stranded, with no food, no water. They were definitely in a very bad situation when that ceasefire was signed. But that's something that I kind of, so the thing is, it's a question of if they didn't have this narrative that could be sold, and a lot of making deals and pieces about selling a narrative to a certain extent, then I don't know if for sure that peace agreement could have come into being if they couldn't accept it this way. The problem is that it comes at a price. It comes at a price because the narrative, again, of you can't get anything out of Israel by negotiating with it. You only get something out of Israel by doing what Egypt did, which is smashing Israel in war and taking your lands by force. That narrative has been taken in by other people in the Arab and Muslim world, including the Palestinians.
No doubt.
And they attacked, remember, October 7th, one day after October 6th. That's not a coincidence.
Right.
They were emulating the Egyptians. They were copying them. They attacked also on a holiday. On a holiday, right? Yom Kippur. They attacked on Simchat Torah. They were like, oh, look, the Egyptians did that. It worked for them. We're going to do the same thing.
It's a spiritual thing. There's a lot of spirituality behind it. It's wow. Wow. No, and you see, but I believe that that's our fault, meaning, I think that, and I'm simplifying this, of course. It's very complex. Our 77-year conflict is extremely complex. What I do think when dealing with people in the Middle East, our enemies in the Middle East, most of them are Arabs, is the idea of giving land, especially when we're talking about giving land within the borders of Israel and what some people would call Palestine, Gaza, West Bank, which I, of course, don't agree with, is when you give any sort of land, there's no peace to be had. You're incentivizing, you're emboldening them to continue to fight for more of it. And so in the case of Egypt, I think maybe it worked, at least for the time being, is because that wasn't land that we initially saw as part of Israel. Maybe there are Jews that do, maybe there are very religious Jews that do see it as part of Greater Israel. But for most Israelis, I think at the time, they saw it as land that we achieved during victory. And so giving that back maybe wasn't as big of a deal because it was at the end of the day, Egypt was a different country that, yes, they wanted to destroy us, but they were a different country altogether versus the Palestinians, the Israelis, Palestinians. I'm sorry, it's a different thing, but the Gazans or the West Bank Arabs, for example, most of them see the entire country as theirs. And so giving land, I believe, only furthers the conflict. I'm curious to hear what you think about that. Two-stater versus one-stater.
Well, you're right in the sense that the only case where the sort of land for peace model worked was Egypt, you
Mhm.
know, and worked in a very limited way because, as you know, they don't really accept so much the peace with Israel. It's kind of this thing they have to deal with, imposed on them by
They're just
whatever.
waiting for an
And
opportunity. I believe Egypt would definitely, if Israel was in a really bad predicament, if people thought we were on the verge of destruction, I think Egypt would step in and try to
look, the
give the
problem
final.
Egypt has is there was a lot of talk about this, by the way, in the last year and a half. There's Egyptian troops in the Sinai and Egyptians saying this and that, and periodically there's a call to annul the peace treaty in Jordan as well. I got these comments in the videos. Our government may be at peace with Israel, but we the people are not. All this type of stuff.
Right, 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 right.
So it's not a very encouraging peace, but look, the country is not in very good shape, and they don't have the political or financial capital really to sort of defy the U.S., for example, and go to a war with Israel, which does raise a question of can you make peace basically through financial dependability, agreements that are enforced by larger and larger superpowers like the U.S. and stuff. It's a question. I don't know.
Mhm.
I agree with you though that for some of these groups, it's not about liberating this or that land, but it's about the whole thing. Um, I think also some of my videos in some of these Muslim countries also showed me a certain narrative, which we talked about earlier, which is this idea that basically Jews and Muslims lived peacefully together in Palestine or other places, right? Palestine, of course, wasn't a country, but Ottoman Empire. But for them, it's Palestine, Morocco, wherever it is, lived this great coexistence. The Muslims took the Jews in. You probably hear this story as well, which is partially true in Morocco. Right after the Inquisition, some of them fled to Morocco, so there's a little bit of truth in that. Basically, the Muslims took the Jews in, treated them so well until Zionism. And then Zionism came and kind of destroyed this great
Crazy how they all
equilibrium.
believe that. It's crazy how they believe up until 1948, we had no issues in the Muslim world.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a
Well, according
list. The list, I try sometimes when I see comments, when people comment on my videos on different platforms, I want to send them the massive list of persecution against Mizrahi Jews. And it's so extensive. Like it's such a long list. And I find myself getting frustrated because
yeah,
Instagram or YouTube, they don't let you, you have a limit to how many
yeah,
words you can post. And it's a huge list going from the beginning of the birth of Islam all the way up until 1948. I don't even add 1948 and later. I do
yeah,
like the year 640 up until 1940,
right.
and it's so long. It's
And
such
and
a massive.
and that's just the massacres, right? It's not
Yeah.
just the entire concept of being a dhimmi. Some people don't
Mhm.
understand what the concept of being a dhimmi is. It's not just that you pay a tax, right? The jizya, like okay, you get taxed more, fine. Also, in a social, progressive, whatever, in I don't know where you get in Israel, you get taxed more if you make more money. That's like it's something that's mandated by the religion and by the empire at the time in order to humble you, right? It's a tax that is part of a subjugation system. When you go pay the dhimmi, you have to get on your knees, and sometimes you get slapped or something. Like there's like a ceremony. Any Muslim is allowed to see the ceremony where you hand over the money. It's a system of subjugation. Now,
Right.
in that system, of course, it varies how it's enforced. You might have a somewhere in Andalusia in Spain, you could have a specific caliph, or not a caliph, but a head of one of the kingdoms there, or the person who collects the tax there, who's like he's not interested in that, or maybe he has a Jewish advisor or Jewish this that, and he doesn't like it doesn't always. But it is a system. That's what I'm trying to point out. The fact that there were instances where it wasn't so bad and people could get along doesn't mean it's not a system. And I think that that's something that they don't recognize and understand when it comes to the Jews being self-determined in their own country, right? Like it should be a natural aspiration. If you are living your whole existence as a subjugated minority among these people, then of course you're going to want to be self-determined in your own country. That doesn't mean everything was
Mhm.
terrible and bad. And that's why I'm always careful. Like I don't like the narrative that I don't like pushing this point too hard all the time of oh, the Muslims did nothing but oppress Jews. Like I don't like that. I don't believe it either. But my problem
Right,
is
it's
when
not the case.
it's not the case, but they're using the opposite in order to promote a political point. If you tell
Yeah,
me,
to say
look,
like, oh, you unappreciative Jews, look how good we were to you, and this is how you repay. This is how you repay us. This is how you treat our brothers in Palestine. Meanwhile, they don't care. They don't really care about them either. They treat them like dhimmis in many cases. Like I've spoken to Palestinians and Palestinian Americans, and they know they're seen as very low on the totem pole in the Arab world. They're the losers of the Arab world to them, They just for them it's like, well, if I have to choose between Palestinians or Jews, clearly I'm going to be pro-Palestinian. But if the Palestinians didn't have a conflict with the Jews, if the Jews either didn't exist there or existed in very small numbers and weren't the ruling body, then we don't care about the Palestinians. I mean, this I think was it something Darwish? Was it this guy Mohammed Darwish? There was some documentary or some movie that was made. I'll send it to you after the episode.
Mahmoud Darwish is like the national poet of the Palestinians.
I
Maybe it's
think
him.
that's who he was. I think that's who it was. He has glasses, older. I don't know if he's still alive,
I
but
remember what he looks like. He's not alive anymore, but he's like their national poet. He's a very famous figure.
I'm pretty sure it was him. There was a video of him, and he was saying this to a Jewish girl. He was saying, if not for the Jews, the Palestinian people would have no relevance in the world. Our relevance comes directly from the fact that the Jews came back and settled the land, and you know what I'm saying? Which is a crazy take, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't agree with that. I think it's really hard to argue that. Like the Palestinians became such a big deal in the international stage because their conflict is with the Jewish people.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there's a lot of truth in that. You can just see it in the numbers of the journalists that are here all the time compared to all the other places. So for sure, it draws a lot of attention, and there are all kinds of reasons you can talk about why. But you what you stated before about this, like again, that concept of we treated you so well, and now look what you're doing, or everything was great until Zionism. That annoys me. Like if you want to say that if you want to kind of give a slightly more beautiful picture of what the relations between Jews and Muslims were, and use that as an inspiration for a better future, I'm all for it. Fine. Yeah, look, we got along in the past and can get along in the future. Great.
Right.
But for me, what's annoying is they're using this kind of false past and over rosy past in order to promote the destruction of Israel, in order to say
Perhaps.
everything was great until Israel. That annoys me. That makes me go into the aggressive mode of reminding them, no, like you said, look at all the massacres, look at this, look at that. And that's not a nice place to go. And, it's not, it's also hard to make peace that way when you tell people your past was so horrible. People don't want to hear that either. But that's kind of what I was telling you, the catch-22, that either direction that you go, there's a third way.
That's anti-Semitism for you. Yeah, they
Maybe.
people are very accepting of other victimhoods. Most people don't care about Jewish victimhood. Why? Because we're largely successful. So how can you be a successful victim? You're not a victim, you're successful. That's why we're not seen as minorities in the West, even though we are. In the United States, the Jews are a minority, but no one sees us that way. Why? Because we're seen as rich white people, essentially, even though you have so many other, I don't see Jews as white per se, but even if you want to say Ashkenazim are white, there's a large percentage of Sephardic Mizrahi Jews in the U.S.
Persian Jews, Iranian Jews.
Tons, but nobody even knows it. The Americans are so ignorant to that. They don't even know. They're Jews from Iran. They're Jews from Syria. Who? What? They just think every Jew is related to Barbara Streisand in the U.S.,
Yeah.
Or Ben
Yeah.
Stiller, Adam
There's
Sandler.
well,
This is
there's a certain stereotype of what the Jew is in the U.S. for sure. For
Yeah, I
sure.
just found out that Jerry Seinfeld is part Syrian. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah, I saw that as well. That was
Tal
also
mentioned that. I was like, I had no clue. His
well. They
mother
also
comes
what they
from
also don't know that Syrians and Lebanese in general are very white people. Yeah.
100%, by the way. That's very interesting. Yeah, that's
That's
also very true.
Syria is much more white than Israel.
Dude, even so many, but when I was doing
Like,
checkpoints, there's so much, this is why I loved having these conversations. I love doing the podcast because like I'm noticing that through all of our content is this, Jewish pro-Israel Israeli content, like you, me, Tal, Sahar, there's Barack. There's so many different people making this content. Um, the Arab world there are people in the Arab world, whether they're Arab Americans or Arabs in Europe and Britain or whatever, the ones with logical minds that are willing to step out of their box, they're saying, we're actually not Arab. We were Levantine. We're also Semitic, and we were taken over by the Arabs. Interesting. So the Jews actually have a point here. I've seen this. I've seen this rhetoric. They're actually not even in support of Israel, but I've seen some
No.
videos online, some reels of Lebanese being, we're actually not Arabs, we're Berbers or whatever, and it's like I feel like this is coming from the education that the Jewish side is trying to push of, yeah, you're not you're not Arabs either, but yet you're so hell bent on pushing Arab colonialism onto the Jews, not acknowledging that it actually happened to you as well.
Well, that's very interesting what you're saying, and I would say to that a couple of things, but it's a crucial point what you just put on, like crucial point, because you were talking about the ignorance of Americans. In the American mindset, the indigenous person of the Middle East is an Arab guy wearing a kafia and a thobe and whatever, and like Lawrence of Arabia style. That's the Middle Eastern person.
Yep.
And of course, the problem with that is the Middle Eastern person post 732 or whatever, when the Arabs started to spread out from Arabia and conquer all these places. Before that, you had Assyrians and Armenians and Jews and Greeks and Persians and a gazillion different types of people, and you still have a lot of these communities in the Middle East. But they view the true indigenous person, as the Arab and the Muslim, because that's what they know. They barely
Right.
know about the
From
existence
the
of all these
movies.
other
It's from all the
communities.
movies.
Also, yeah, it's like a very visual thing, right? It's an Arab guy, it's a Bedouin guy, it's whatever. And I'm nothing against them. And of course, you take an average proud Muslim person today. It's not his fault. He has nothing to do with it. And of course, he has his place in the region. And I made the effort to learn Arabic as best I could. And I've seen Arab movies and seen some of the it's a very interesting culture, and it's great, and I'm all for it. And I have nothing against it, but it's a problem when people, they view the region just through that lens instead of the lens of what actually happened, which is the Arab Muslims colonized all these places. And what you have now is the aftermath of that, which is a Muslim dominated, Arab dominated region, which are a bunch of minorities who are usually in various ways subjugated, except for the Jews, except for Israel, where they managed to reclaim that. And that's why we're so hated in that world. And
We
as
had the
far as
audacity. That's really what it comes
yeah.
down to. We took we really, to put it in an unpolitically correct way, we shoved our foot up the ass of Arab honor. And after being dhimmis for so long, now this little minority has the audacity to try to change the demographics and the religious narrative, right? The narrative of how Islam is supposed to go, their conquest of Jerusalem. And now these Jews have the nerve to say, oh, no, we want it back after how many thousand years. We're like, yeah, we're tired of you killing us all over the world. This is ours. It was ours. It's ours according to religion. We won it through military victory. Too bad. We're back. This is essentially what it is. And the Arabs are like, no, 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 no. Islam says this is unacceptable. We say this is unacceptable. We don't care how many times you kick our asses. We're not giving up on this.
So definitely have what do they call it? The immovable object meets the indestructible force or something. I don't know the exact quote, but it's like one of those. You have two sides that aren't budging, So it's a problem. But I would say
Well,
definitely, like you talked about the religious aspect. There's that, and there's like the cultural historical aspect, which we talked about earlier. For many centuries, Jews had a very specific role in the Arab and Muslim world, which is you are a subjugated minority. You live at our discretion. We're so generous, right? We let you live. We take you in, as they say. And that's your role. And then all of a sudden it flips, and the Jews are equals, right? They have, like, you have your state, we have our state. But it's not only that Israel is equal, because in some ways it's superior, not because I think we're superior to them, but just in the results that Israel produces, right?
oh,
So
for
Israel
sure.
is a more advanced
Outshining them.
country. winning all the wars, all these things. You know what I mean? I don't want it that way. I like the idea of, I would love the idea of, you have one high-tech center in Tel Aviv and one in Ramallah and we're competing. That'd be amazing. I don't want to outperform them.
It could
Countries
be.
where
It could be if they weren't so bent on honor, if they accepted for eventually. I mean, like Saudi Arabia is, just
like
accept that the
UAE.
Jews, huh?
UAE, the Emirates, we're not
Yeah, yeah,
outperforming
yeah.
them right now.
Right,
They're outperforming us probably. I mean, they have
right.
the advantage of all the foreign labor that they can use, but still, they're not focused on that thing at all. They're focused on building themselves up. And lo and behold, look, you have the insane stuff, highest skyscraper in the world, endless business,
Nah.
whatever. Things are going on, crazy things going on over there because they're not focused on that. They know who they are, which is to the subject that you talked about some of these other places where maybe they don't know who they are. Once they're Arab, then they're Muslim, then they're Levantines, then
Mm-hmm.
they're Phoenicians. And they know exactly who they are. They're indigenous Arab Muslims from that region,
Right.
and they know what they want to achieve, which is to be the biggest economic powerhouse in the region, and that's it. They're not focused on anything else.
Yeah, they're done. So let me ask you something. Uh, October 7th. You might not necessarily agree with Bibi. Do you feel that we should have done it? Do you feel that like our response should have been different? Should it have been gentler? Should we have given back all the prisoners? Say there were 5,000 uh, terrorists that they wanted to exchange for our 250-ish hostages. Do you feel we made the best decision we could at the time, or would you have? Do you think there was maybe a better or more optimal way?
First of all, I think in retrospect, it's always easier to make decisions. Let's start with that. I mean, there's a very popular these days, a lot in the Second World War, all this attacks against Winston Churchill online. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like, I know what I would have done back in 1940. I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, smart ass in retrospect, fine. So same thing here. I don't know. I think there's a big question of what really was on the table or what is on the table. I think there's a lot of the time this perception that an all for all swap is or was on the table, and I'm not sure that's the case. As someone who spent quite a bit of time in Hostage Square when I was doing some reporting there, because I still do freelance reporting now, and you talk to people, these are people more on the Israeli left, Tel Avivniks and things like that, and they seem certain that there's a deal, and the only one stopping the deal is Bibi, and I'm not sure that's the case. If I were Hamas, I wouldn't release all the hostages. Why would I? It doesn't confer with what I believe ideologically, and the hostages are their best bargaining
The
chip that they
hostages,
have.
100%. Yeah.
And the difference between having 0 hostages and having like 1 or 2 or 5 hostages is all the difference in the world. So I don't know, based on what you're making that assessment, maybe they've said some things to that effect, kind of, but very often they've said things and then backtracked. So I think a lot of what should have been done is based on information which we don't have the full picture of, which is, was there really such a deal on the table of all for all? I find it hard to believe that they got 1,200 prisoners out for one soldier, Gilad Shalit, and now they're going to give up 250 hostages for, even if it's several thousand prisoners in Israeli jails or whatever. I'm not sure such a thing was on the table. I think maybe after pounding them militarily in that first phase of the war and the ground incursion, maybe they would be more flexible in what they were giving up. And I understand that sentiment. Yeah, like if all for all was on the table, then you do all for all, you get all hostages back, and then you see what to do about Hamas. I can understand that, but I'm just not sure that was on the table. So that's the problem. That's the only other alternative, because to do nothing doesn't seem to me like a realistic option after what they did.
Although it's so crazy how many people think that doing nothing was the best choice. Like Norman Finkelstein, he just, yeah, we should have just done nothing. It's
Okay,
so insane.
look, this war, and it wasn't just this war, it was the Hezbollah bombing, just kind of shows that people don't like the idea of Israel doing anything, right? They just want Israel to get bombed and do nothing. I mean, we were under
Yeah, they
bombardment
just want
from
us to roll
Hezbollah
over and
months.
die. Yeah, we're supposed to die because we're not supposed to be here in the first place. The audacity of us to even, you know. So, um,
But look at Lebanon, because that's another case. I mean, you had Gaza, but they were bombing from Lebanon for 8 months, and Israel did pretty much nothing. I mean, Israel was as restrained as can be, because they were invested in Gaza, right? All the resources were there. And then as soon as Israel responded in Lebanon, it was like this, oh my God, like you didn't see this coming. I mean, you could, this is the most obvious incoming operation in human history. I mean, we all knew it
Well,
was coming, but when it happened, they still were in this shock of, why is Israel attacking Lebanon? Because they were bombing Israel for 8 months from Lebanon. That's not so complicated to understand, is it?
100%. So it seems like you have a very open mind. It doesn't seem like you're necessarily very left wing or right wing. You probably have, opinions that maybe more of a libertarian, or ideas that go a little bit in both directions depending on the concept. Seems like you have pretty fair judgment. This is my this is my take.
I
In
would like to
opti
think so.
Sure, sure,
I,
absolutely.
I mean, look, here's something interesting because you said you're kind of more right wing, right? I'm. This is why I like Einat
Not
Wilf.
in a
You
religious
told
sense,
me,
by the way. Not in a religious
yeah,
sense, by the way. I'm not
in
gonna.
in
I'm
in
not.
a sense of analyzing what the enemy wants.
Correct.
That's why I'm saying that I have that concept as well. And you mentioned Dana Wilf that you were supposed to interview her, and I'm a big fan of her work and her book, The War of Return, which talks about the right of return, which is the main concept the Palestinians hold for the liberation of
Hmm.
all of Palestine and kind of
Hmm.
reversing Israel's existence, right? So I mean, I definitely I agree with her a lot in the sense that I'm kind of very right wing in the sense that I have no illusions as far as what the Palestinians and most of the Arab world want and what they believe, which is, as we said, the Jews have a certain role in the Muslim and Arab world they had, which is to be subjugated minority. You can live amongst us as a minority, but having your own state, no, no, no. That's why always, I'm not against Jews. I'm just against Zionism. You probably heard that 100 times as
Yes,
well,
of course, of course.
of
Yeah, yeah.
course. So I'm not against Jews as long as they don't have their own state. That's basically what
As
it
long as
means.
they
As
do
long
what
as
we want, as long as they follow our directives, our rules, then we're fine with Jews. But as soon as they have a military with an air force and a say so, we don't like that very much.
yeah. So what I'm saying is, I have no illusions. I don't agree with the illusion of some people on the left that you can placate. I don't know how you say it, the Palestinians by giving them some land or some goodies or whatever it
Placate.
is, and then they're gonna they're not gonna want to achieve the final goal. So in that sense, I'm very right wing, but in the other sense, I'm kind of left wing in like I very much think that what the likes of Smotrich and those people are doing is very harmful to Israel because um, basically I think the right wing in Israel kind of, if you can call it that way, which is almost everyone at this point, right? Because of the reality, it's kind of split into two. I
Hmm.
think there's the larger group that I fit in, and maybe you do as well, which is okay, the Palestinians. You can't give them land for peace because that's not what they want. Some land or an agreement with Israel. They want the end of Israel. Therefore, you have to take that into consideration and be very tough security wise and not you understand that this is the long game and you can't buy them off essentially like a bribe. So that's I think most Israelis are more there. And then there's the smaller group of people who are the real ideologues who I think might even sabotage potential progress in the name of Judea and Samaria, this and that hilltop and so forth. And I'm like very much against those people, But I don't think they're that big a minority. Even I think like they get 10% in the vote, right? The Smotrich Benville, they get 10% in the vote, and they represent that group. Those are also the group that do some of the bad things there. They go harass
So
Palestinian farmers, throw rocks at them, do all those things, and I'm very much against that, and I've spoken out against it quite harshly, I think.
totally, I agree with that. But let me ask you, with Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they're very religious people, understood. I happen to think that although maybe they say things out of pocket, I think a lot of the things they say, whether they sound good or not, have a lot of facts behind them. For example, the with the West Bank, you have a lot of people that say, "Oh, the West Bank is an obstacle to peace." I think, on the contrary, it's the it's the foundation of the biblical Israeli heartland. In my very strong, and I don't even think it's an, I'll die on this hill. This is a religious conflict, much more so than a land dispute. I think Einat also says
For
this.
sure.
And so, if Jews are not willing to look at this from a religious lens, whether an Israeli is the most religiously practicing person or not, if the Jewish collective in Israel, inside and outside of Israel, doesn't acknowledge that this is a religious dispute, but the Arab and Muslim world does, we're not understanding them. We really are not understanding them. If we're trying to come at this from a logical, secularist, Western lens of, well, if we divide the West Bank and we give them Jenin, and maybe we'll give them this, and we'll give them, and if we give them parts of Jerusalem, they should be happy with it. Doesn't it make sense? They're looking at it from a deeply religious lens. And Smotrich and Ben Gvir understand this, very fundamentally understand this. And I think the Arabs hate them largely because they know that they can't fool them, versus they can use the liberal Israelis as useful idiots and say, oh, yeah, 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 we love you. You guys want peace with us. You're wonderful. You understand us. You want us to have happiness and freedom. Meanwhile, they're going to walk all over them because they understand, these people, it didn't help them on the Gaza border on October 7th, unfortunately. Not to lump everyone into the liberal category, but those Gazans didn't exactly spare their lives when they came through the border. And so I'm just curious to hear, like, what are things that Smotrich and Ben Gvir say? I'm not a diehard fan of theirs, but what do you think what are things they say, rhetoric they say that you think is very destructive, very dangerous?
Well, first of all, I would say you're absolutely correct. There's a huge religious element here. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine, basically, right? Muslim Brotherhood is a religious movement, but I think there's also that like historical, cultural element, which is not per se 100% religious, which is, as you said, the Jews had a specific role in the world. This is the collective memory of centuries, right? Jews don't have a state; they're minorities spread across the various Arab Muslim empires. So that's also it's like a historical, cultural thing. It's not necessarily a directly religious thing, right? So that's also worth noting, that you can have a very deep-seated belief against any Jewish state that's not 100% rooted in religion. And we see it a lot in the West, right? And all these European, where they say, a state of all its citizens. And these are often very secular people, college protesters, human rights groups, whatever. So I think it's a bit, to see it just through religion, the kind of like that completely uncompromising element, I think is a bit not accurate enough. And also there are some actually religious forces, in the UAE and other places, who actually, through the lens of Islam, view ability and cooperation with the Jews as possible, right? So I think it's not a accurate enough description, although it's probably, if you had to take out of all the things, it's probably the most relevant one. Yeah. So that's one thing. But secondly, as far as Ben Gvir and Smotrich, look, I mean, Smotrich, I think Smotrich is more problematic than Ben Gvir. I think Ben Gvir is more of a kind of loudmouth. He says, I mean, he did a good job as a politician in the sense that there was a period where every time there was a terror attack in Israel, he was the first one there. Every time. He did the legwork, right? The politicians here, terror attack here, stabbing here, shooting here. Who's there? Ben Gvir. I'm going to stop it. So, of course, he became very popular because, he's like, we're dealing with terror. I'm the one who cares, and I'm going to do something about it. But, I mean, he did have a painting of Baruch Goldstein in his home, of the Third Temple in his home. I think that's very destructive. Right. I think
the Third Temple, you think the Third Temple is destructive?
I think in the hands of those type of people, yeah. I mean, I think I personally don't like this, the idea that if Jews go up to the Temple Mount is so offensive, right? I mean, I think I think Jews should be allowed to pray there and all that. Right, but I do think the idea of the Third Temple among the most fanatic usually involves destroying the Dome of the Rock. And I think that's extremely dangerous. It's a very fringe group of people who want it, and this lie.
I don't think by the way, I don't think it's a fringe group, by the way. I actually think most Israelis hope that Third Temple will be built.
Yeah, but not in that way. There are some people who are explicit about the idea of, okay, we're going to destroy Dome of the Rock, replace it with the Third Temple, and then there are some people who say when the Mashiach comes, the Third Temple will be built, which is something a lot more vague,
Well, how is it going to be built? How it's going to be destroyed if it's going to be built? I mean, it's kind of inevitable.
Fine. I'm just saying, though, that there is, in the end of the day, the lie of Al-Aqsa is in danger has been used for over a century. The Hebron riots, which you know about in 29, were ignited by Al-Aqsa is in danger. It's always Al-Aqsa is in danger. And I think realistically, right now, Al-Aqsa is not in danger, not by the Israeli government or by the people. Right. I don't think so. Right. But if you ask me what bothers me about these type of people, is that they are the ones who, if someone says Al-Aqsa is in danger, they can point to them and they would have some legitimacy in their argument because of
Sure,
the things that
sure.
they've said and done. That's one thing. And then there's also like the kind of more expansionist rhetoric. I mean, someone like Smotrich once said, it says in the Bible or in the Talmud, I don't remember where, that Jerusalem would spread from Jerusalem to Damascus. I mean, if you hear something like that, that's expansionist religious
Right,
rhetoric that doesn't help us at all. I mean, of
right.
course,
I agree with that.
I'm not saying that Smotrich thinks that in his lifetime Israeli armies are going to march on Damascus, right? We know that. But for someone listening from the outside, it's like, oh wow, you see, look, the Jews want to do this and that. So that's dangerous rhetoric. And
I'm not into expansionism. I just believe we shouldn't give up anything we have. I'm not what I will say though is if a country wages war against us, we should take some of their land as a deterrent because many of these fundamentalist groups, they're willing to die for the cause. They don't care. They're not afraid of death. So that killing them is not an incentive. Yeah, winning, smashing an enemy is an incentive for them not to do it again. But taking land, not for the sake of expansionism, but saying this is a punishment for you waging war against. Stop waging war, and we won't take any land. This is what I believe. As a form of saying stop waging the wars when we won't do it.
Look, what you're basically saying, and I agree with, is that it's kind of like a video game. You get to try, and then when it doesn't work, you reload, or you go back to where you saved last time. In the sense that that's what's
Right.
been happening in Gaza, right? They launch a bunch of rockets and all this. Israel responds. The UN, the international community forces a ceasefire. All the rebuilding money comes back in. All the other things are
Do it
taken care
again.
of, right?
Yeah,
UNRWA
they
takes
do
care
it
of the
again.
education. This takes care of the hospitals. Your job is to wage war. There was even a Hamas person who said it, which was incredible. He said the tunnels are for the Hamas fighters. The schools, that's UNRWA's job. It's not our job to take care of our population. Our job is to fight Israel. So, in that sense, you're right. It's like you have a redo and a redo and a redo. You have endless redo. Then, of course, that's a huge problem because that's a recipe for endless war, which is what we have.
So what do you think is some tough questions with Gaza now? Hamas still, you still have Hamas that exists. They're causing these little melee attacks, these s small groups of four planting, sticky bombs on the tanks, shooting their RPGs, their advanced RPGs. You also have IEDs. You also have different kinds of booby traps, etc. This is a very prolonged war in Gaza. Do you think that we can actually have some sort of peace? Can we get rid of Hamas? Do we have to, would the best option be to send as many Gazans as we could elsewhere? Um, what are your thoughts? Super tough, super tough. I know it's a tough question, but
Yeah, I think all the options are kind of bad. And I think Netanyahu did the worst of all the bad options, which is kind of to choose sort of nothing.
right.
Stall, wait, kind of say a bit of this, a bit of that. That's kind of what he done most of his career. Part of it for political reasons, coalition partners. Part of it just because I think as a character, I don't view him ever. I never viewed him as a decisive person. I think he's very often waits and waits and stalls and doesn't want to make a decision because a decision could be bad and rock the boat. So he kind of like,
Hmm.
I think that's been one of our problems throughout this entire last year and a half plus is that we've had amazing military achievements, but we haven't had really much diplomatic national achievements, except for maybe now with the U.S. joining in the bombing of Fordo in Iran. I think the war wages on in Gaza, and it's just there isn't really much of a clear objective besides destroying Hamas. On his right flank, people are talking about reoccupying Gaza, settling Gaza. He hasn't done anything to dispel that because, that's his coalition partners. I think that's
They might have a plan. America and Israel may have a joint plan that they don't really want to share with people because it could give up maybe strategic advantage because they've done a lot of talking and sometimes that doesn't help.
true. But, I just think that in any case, I think Netanyahu has been very invisible, for the last year, 8 months. I mean, he does a press conference once every 3 months or 4 months, then disappears. He's not out there making Israel's case day in, day out as he should be during this type of period. And I just think the from the beginning, like,
Why do you say
I
that
think
though? Because he gives a
because
lot of yeah.
I don't think he gives a lot of speeches. I don't think
Well,
you
he's
think
on
you
social media.
compare him to someone like Zelensky as far as the visibility after the war started.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear to us that the goal, generally speaking, maybe some Smotrich and like have another goal, but the goal for 90% of Israelis is get the hostages back and remove the threat, right? Not go back to October 6th, where Hamas is just in
So ha
control and gets to rebuild Gaza and go back to the same situation. I think that's
what is
clearly the goal for all of
what is
us.
removing what does removing the threat mean? Like, how do you think we actually accomplish this?
So I maybe removing the threat is not the right word because that's a bit too general. Let's say at the very least, not going back to what was, yeah. Because that's the easiest thing. Get the hostages out with some deal to end the war. That's kind of like what Hamas really wants. And Hamas retakes control of Gaza and slowly but surely rebuilds everything that was destroyed and can even claim a type of victory, right? No, Israel, the
Oh, they
US,
would. Oh, they
everyone
would.
together weren't able to defeat us. And look, we're back in charge.
Yeah,
I
that's
think that would be
exactly what they'll say.
a disaster. So not that. But then what options do you have? Bad ones. You could reoccupy Gaza militarily. You could try to actually like bite into Gaza, as you said, like with settlements,
Mhm.
as either a punishment, right? To don't. This is what happens when you attack us, or because of the religious fervor of the Smotrich like. There's the option that is very popular among supposedly smart people because it doesn't really take real life into account, which is like this international coalition technocrat talk. I think that's just like BS.
Of just having like Saudi Arabia or whoever else running
Yeah,
it
the
together.
UAE, Egypt,
It's
technocrats. What
ridiculous.
does this all mean? It's just going to be taken over by the people with the guns at some point. I mean, none
A
of these people
hundred
are going to.
percent. No, no, no. Let me
It
say,
sounds nice. It sounds nice on Twitter and on paper, but we all know where it ends. And
Israel should have, whether the Gazans stay in it or not, whether Israeli citizens settle it or not, this land should be completely controlled by Israel. Point blank. End of story. There should not be any other ruling body, even the United States, controlling that parcel of
but
land.
is that a realistic long term? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I think that, what I here's what I think. I think that the Gazans need to make a decision, and they're not going to like the decision regardless. None of these decisions is going to be favorable to them, but it's a choice between a not as ideal decision and maybe a decision that's a little bit more ideal. You can either leave, either you go find somewhere else to go, and I think Israel should do their best, which I think they have been, to facilitate, hopefully finding countries that they can go to, or they stay and they have to abide by the laws of Israel. What I mean by that is not to give them citizenship per se, but to give them resident status, to really help build up the infrastructure of Gaza, to have Israeli army bases in Gaza. Not to, in the beginning, we're probably going to need a lot of presence. We're going to need checkpoints. It's going to be tough for the first few years. But if most of them may not be free of attacks, I mean, we may not be perfect with no terror attacks ever again, but if they're much, much, much lower than they were, because the consensus of the Gazans is not, hey, we hate you. We may never love you. You've killed a lot of our family members. We want you to leave, but we want to stay in this land. We give up. We're not going to win this. We don't have nuclear weapons. We don't have an air force. We don't have tanks. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, but we don't want to go live in Indonesia. This is our land. Just let us live here. We'll make it work for however long they want to. Maybe their children, maybe their grandchildren will leave and move to New York. Who knows? But something's got to give. Like, at some point, Israel has to be very, very clear, and we have to make very tough decisions that the international community may hate us for. They already do. But if we don't actually make a very clear, decisive action, we're going to be back at square one again. We're going to have another October 7th, more hostages taken, all because we don't want the hate and the judgment from the world of, well, you're the fake Jews and the Gazans are indigenous and you took their land. If that's what we're going to believe and that's what we're going to allow the world to tell us, then we'll never win. We'll be in this position forever, all because we wanted to appease appease most people who don't care about us anyway, who don't like us regardless. This is my take. This is my very strong opinion.
Look, I don't know. I don't have a solution. That's why I
Yeah.
kind of understand why Netanyahu is just kind of stalling, because he doesn't have a solution either. If you want an interesting solution, I mean, our friend Einat Wilf that I've been raving about here a couple of times. She had a very interesting solution, which is individual surrender, right? Which is you designate a part of Gaza, the northern half, to Gazans who surrender. So if you want to surrender, you go to the northern part, and then everything is taken care of. Meaning surrender means you sign a document. There's no right of return. I'm not a refugee. I'm a Gazan. I'm a proud Gazan. I want to live in Gaza in peace with Israel. So right of return is off the table. You're off the register of UNRWA, and then you get the reconstruction, all the reconstruction, as much as you want,
Okay, but
basically.
okay, and who rules it? What's the deal with ruling and all that? Did she
I
cover
don't
that?
remember that specific. I guess it could be at the beginning under some type of Israeli, like you say, military administration, kind of like
Has
Area
to be,
C
because
or whatever.
how do we trust there won't be terrorists that infiltrate that supposed surrender thing?
You're right. You're right. But I think UNRWA is really one of the big keys to this, right? As long as you are registered in under UNRWA as a refugee, that means your goal is not to build up Gaza, but to quote return to your original home in Israel as it
Right,
is supposedly forever, and your
right,
descendants forever. So once
right,
you're off, that is it's such a symbolic thing that you understand that
right.
okay, I'm not trying to move into Israel. I'm trying to build Gaza into something worthwhile, which you can because there's so much international will to do this. There's funds flowing in from everywhere to do it. It's a matter of you focusing on doing that and not fighting with
Right,
Israel and then getting bombed by Israel, unfortunately. So I do
right.
think that maybe something like that, where specific factions decide that they're out of the game of return and war with Israel, and they are in the game of building Gaza, and it becomes clear, and then you start to see a split. Like some people will remain in the more of the hellhole that will be the non-surrendered part, and they continue to stockpile weapons and this, and then that becomes a legitimate target. And others move into the other area. Of course, I don't know. Then the problem is what happens if inside that area people start to subvert and whatever and fire rockets from there. Then that's
Yeah, I
also
think it's
a
going to
problem in itself.
become way too mixed. I don't think they're going to be honest. I think
I,
they're going
I,
to play a
I
lot of
still think
games.
though. I still think though that once you wipe people off UNRWA, it's a game changer. Because UNRWA, for me, UNRWA is essentially it's such a problematic thing because it is the international UN sanctioned stamp of approval of
Hmm.
no Israel. The
Right, right,
UN itself says you have a right to go into there. The
right,
UN and is paying you money until the day that you go back there, and you cannot get wiped off the refugee registry even if you become a citizen of another country, even if you have a Palestinian passport, you cannot. The only way is when you move into Israel. So when you start to, that is like the core of the Palestinian, the ideological part of the Palestinian component, which involves the religion, as you said, but also like the narrative, which is not just about religion. It's we lived in Palestine, it was ours, the Jews came, they stole it from us, they kicked us out, we're going to get it back. We're in this dark tunnel, this terrible struggle. The light at the end of the struggle is return and the end of
right,
Israel. Once
right.
you wipe that thing down, that is when that is like a crucial thing, I would say for
Oh
sure.
my, by the way, the almost in I believe that most of the reason why we're still in this conflict is because as Jews, as Israelis, we are helping further the narrative, and I think Kenan has said this, further the narrative that the two-state, not forget actually the two-state, that the idea of them defeating us and creating a Palestine is actually possible. And we've been giving them reasons to believe that that's so. We've been giving them uh, reasons to believe that if they keep fighting, it may actually happen. But if what you're saying, and I actually think is a smart idea, this idea of surrendering and moving off of the owner registry, if they forfeit the idea of this, we can actually move somewhere. So long as there's a reason for an incentive for them to fight, they're going to do it. It's a no-brainer. They're going to keep doing it unless there's no. It, now I think that's why I'm so pro. I'm so pro all these wars, especially the attack on Iran. Hopefully, they actually accomplished the destruction of these nuclear sites, and they because there's a lot of speculation that they didn't hit deep enough. Listen, it's nerve-wracking. It could get worse before it gets better. I'm hoping to God that it doesn't. But um, we have to be very clear and decisive in our military victories, and I do believe that in the Middle East, might is right. The powerful hold the get to call the shots, and you can't really have you can have dialogue with people like in the Emirates. You can't have dialogue with people like Hamas. There's no dialogue to be had. It's all strategic. It's all okay, we'll agree to this so we have the ability to continue to fight you down the road. We'll play the long game. We'll play chess. We'll play 4D chess. We'll have a ceasefire now. In 3 years, we're attacking you again. In 6 months, we're
No, for
shooting
sure. I,
rockets.
I I think though I think everyone agrees though. I mean, all most Israelis and agree.
A lot of liberal Israelis really are so naive to this. They have this incredible
I
amount of suicidal empathy. They really don't understand it.
I agree. I think there was a shift after October 7th, and now people are like falling back into their old ways. I see it where like we have to be nice to Hamas and this. I still think most Israelis understand that Hamas in the long term will never desire anything but our destruction.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know if it's I think it's I don't even I'm not going to say Hamas. I think it's sugarcoating it to say Hamas. I think it's most of the Gazans.
Yeah, well, the Palestinians in general, the narrative, right? It comes
Sure.
back to the
Okay,
narrative. It's like we
sure.
said, it was Palestine, it was this paradise. The Jews came, the fake Jews, right? The fake Ashkenazi Jews, the Khazar converts, whatever,
Yeah,
came,
yeah, yeah.
stole it from us, right? They stole it from us, and we're gonna get it all back. And that's the most just battle we can ever fight. Yeah, for sure. That's the narrative. The ones who are the most violent executors of that, or actually willing to die for it and kill for it, are Hamas, right? So one person might believe
Sure.
it, but he's a mechanic in Ramallah and whatever. So I'm saying that but the thing is that um, regarding you were talking about being strong, right? You were talking about what were we talking about, like this the solution for Gaza. I'm trying to reconnect with where we were, and I've lost track of something.
Really just about the idea of being very decisive. So we actually, for once, could maybe have a long-lasting peace, not with Egypt and Jordan, but with the quote unquote Palestinians, for us to say, hey guys, we can live with you. We can make it work. We were tired of fighting. We're not looking to send you out of here if you're actually willing to accept that yes, it's a state ruled by Jews now, not by the British, not by the Ottomans. We rule it now. And it probably would be in your best interest. I know you hate hearing this, but it'd probably be in your best interest accepting it because it's not working out too well to fight us. It hasn't been panning out well. Your friends, all your buddies have been joining into the fight. They've been getting their asses kicked too. A Middle Eastern superpower has been funding you and trying to help you, and it hasn't been panning out too well for them either. So maybe you should stop. It's like, no, 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 no. We're not going to stop. We don't care how strong you are. What? It's like, okay, but then you complaining when we kick your ass. I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it too. No, we want our cake and we want to eat it too. It's like,
But okay, but that's the thing here is I think what enables them to keep doing that is the international support. Yeah. I mean, in the end of the
I
day,
think it starts with us. The international community
okay,
is,
but that's what comes down to fighting the correct fight with the international community, which
right.
we haven't done. For example, putting the whole focus on let's build more settlements in the West Bank instead of like fighting the ideology of UNRWA, that's wrong prioritizing as far as what Israel needs, I would say, for example. So there is that issue of um,
I think we should build wherever we damn well please. Like this is where my right wing thing comes in. I'm like, we you yeah, like in terms of the West Bank stuff, I see it as Judea and Samaria as much part of Israel as anywhere else. Like I'm just tired of the appeasement. Like build on whatever hill you want. They don't want us to be there at all. Meaning, like at this point, it's like, forget about splitting up the West Bank. We should annex it, let the Arabs stay there, have their tribal leaders in their cities. If they want to build some other cities and they're peaceful, so be it. Like, I don't mind it personally if they had, I know some other towns. I know the hardliners in the West Bank want them out altogether. They want to either kill them or send them off to Timbuktu. But in terms of like building more settlements, like most of the people who hate us, don't agree with us, don't want us to have, not only don't want us to settle in the West Bank, they don't want us to
Mm.
settle anywhere. So it's all like these little, it's these little things of, well, okay, you could settle in the West Bank, but you got to split it. Or you could settle in the West Bank, but the West Bank is really part of Palestine and the Jews would have to be part of Palestine. It's like, it's all this semantic, like cutesy little nonsense. But if we really
It's
get down
not
to the core
soothing.
of it,
It's not soothing semantics, is it?
it's not soothing semantics.
It's all this noise. But I still, of course, yeah. What I was talking about, it comes from us, but also comes from like what we're trying to push through with the international community. You know, you're saying it starts from us, and I agree. But it's
Yeah.
so again, you have to put this ideology of the end of Israel through return at front and center, and fight it. And I think the first way to fight it is fighting UNRWA and fighting the UN, because at the end of the day, what enables them to not accept that defeat, what you want them is to accept this defeat, right? Not the
Hmm.
defeat of living a good life, maybe having a state peacefully next to Israel, but the defeat and the you understand that your war to destroy Israel, you have been defeated. I think
Right.
that's like it's already happened, but they're just not accepting it. And one of the things that
We're
enables them
giving
not
them
to,
reasons. We as
we
Jews are,
are,
yeah.
but I think it's also what sustains it financially and everything is the international community. I mean, what sustains Gaza, for example, is that the schools are funded by the international
No
community.
doubt, no
Your
doubt, no doubt.
refugee hood is funded, and you're told you are a refugee from Ashkelon and you will go back one day. And look, we're funding your school and everything until you go back.
No
So
doubt.
there's a system that's sustaining it in practice that allows them to keep on with this idea because it sustains actually sustained both ideologically and financially. You know, there was a crazy video I saw, and I have to tell you this. One of the many horrific videos that came out from October 7th, where you see a bunch of people taking back hostages to Gaza. I think one of them was Vinatan Ol, the boyfriend of Al Gamani, right? No, Al Gamani, you know, the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
girl who was a.
Okay, okay.
And you see a bunch of Hamas fighters, and next to the Hamas fighters, you see a kid or some kid. One of the kid, he was like 13, you know. And first of all,
Hmm.
he's telling them, oh, I want to film, and this, which is already very disturbing. Like, why is a 13-year-old kid taking part in a military operation and wants to film
Right.
kidnappings? You know. But then he goes up to the guy, one of the guys who's being kidnapped, in the process of being kidnapped, and he says, "Get out of our houses." You know. There's a
Hmm.
translation. I got it from one of these translated, they're
Right,
shouting
right,
a
right.
bunch of stuff, Allahu Akbar and this, but then he says, get out of our houses. This kid is
Hmm.
14, you know. First of all, you don't know where this guy even lives. Most of Israel never was an Arab house. Yeah, there are some houses in Lod or in parts of Jerusalem where maybe an Arab used to live that was once an Arab house, quote. But, I'm here in Falsaba in a building that was built in a town that was never Arab, in a part of the town that was never Arab. And this was, I'm not living in an Arab house, but it shows the mindset is he's a kid. And as far as he's
Hmm.
concerned, it's his house, even though maybe his great grandfather lived somewhere in that land. And he automatically assumes that any Israeli that's now being taken hostage to Gaza is living in his house, and he needs to get out of
Right.
his house.
Well, they because
So
they don't care if there
that's
was a house.
sustained though by the UN, by UNRWA, by the
Right, right,
international
right.
community. That concept, because if you don't have the financial and ideological support that's pumping that in all the time, you can't sustain such a irrational and impossible idea unless it's sustained like that.
Right, right. Yeah, but I think we're honestly, I think we're moving in the right direction. It's a very painful direction. It's a very hard thing to not only engage in these wars but move deeper into them, right? In most of Israeli history, even if we won decisive victories, a lot of the time we would appease and try to negotiate, and so the victory, the pride and the power of that victory would often be weakened because of our desire to try to make amends with our enemy. Like, we're sorry for winning, for defeating you, let's try to make this work. And they see that as weakness, and they
So
and
would
they
you say
build on
that?
that. And
Would you say that? Based again, going back to my big part of my vlog, right? And then what took up a lot of the discussion, the Egypt question,
yeah,
for
yeah.
example. Would you say that
Okay.
back then giving back Sinai was a mistake because it basically projected a certain something that, like, would you
To
have
an
given up on
extent,
that possibility to get a first peace deal with a major Arab country because you would have to do that kind of appeasement, and it is appeasement, right?
right, to an extent. I don't want to sit here and say that because at the end of the day, we have relative peace with Egypt, although let's be honest, they're supporting weapons smuggling and into they were supporting it into Gaza, so they're indirectly supporting it. I don't think we should do it again. If we did it and maybe it worked, if it happens in the future that we win, we win, let's say, versus Hezbollah or anything, we should, if anything, take land and not return it. Not a massive swath, but land that we see as maybe strategic. Maybe in the Golan, we maybe take additional land on mountaintops that could be a strategic advantage, just to say, hey, this is a good old fuck you. Stop waging war against us. To give back the Golan would be a very big mistake. We should stop giving. If we take it, stop giving it back. Especially, but the thing with land between Egypt with the Sinai is very different than with the Palestinians. Yes, they want to take the land, but it's not the intention's a little bit not a little bit different. The intention's quite different. I think we can agree. Giving
No,
back land, giving back land to the Palestinians, and giving land to the Palestinians is a dastardly mistake. Like it's a catastrophic mistake. You want to say the Sinai was a good idea? I don't know. Tough to say. I guess it worked for now. I don't know how smart of a move it was. I think we probably still could have made it work even if we held on to it. I think we could have, worked from a source of power and strength. And I just don't think the appeasement in the Middle East works. I don't. I'm not saying I'm not a warmonger. Like I would much prefer not to deal with war, but it's like they have to realize like we got to just stop fighting these Jews. They're not these colonialists like we want to believe they are. They're not the French or the British. These people are connected to the land. They're willing to die for it. They're a formidable opponent. They're largely smarter than us as a collective. They're harder working. They have better technology. Let's actually work with them. Let's do trade with them. Let's do business with them. They're not going anywhere. And they have to accept that. Like they just have to accept that. And we shouldn't be emboldening their dumb beliefs. We should be putting our foot down. And I think we've been doing that pretty well so far. Not perfectly, with a lot of mistakes made, but I think by bombing Iran, that's a very clear message of like we're not going anywhere. Stop it already. That's what I say.
I wish that happens. I mean, I wish, I do wish that really people would reach that conclusion, right? Like, okay, Israel's here. Let's make the most of that situation. And I don't think that's happening soon. I think some
Mhm.
things can be, enforced kind of by force, like you said. Like the deal with Egypt is just kind of a reality. They don't have anything they can do about it, or the resources to do anything about it. Same with Jordan. Now you have the UAE, Morocco. Hopefully, Saudi will join in, and Lebanon. The isolation of Hezbollah out of the Lebanese realizing that Hezbollah dragging them into wars with Israel is bad is also a development. So I think it's a combination of just kind of strategic whatever realities happening more than, and maybe some shift in opinion more than, like, I don't have any expectations that people are gonna wake up and realize that this is also destructive for them and they're just gonna. I don't see that. I think it's gonna kind of be forced reality rather than ideological pivot.
That's okay. Meaning I don't need people to love. I don't think we should be so focused on people liking us or loving us,
No,
but
I agree.
we need the respect. Like, will Egyptians or Jordanians ever love us? Probably not. Maybe, maybe they'll get to know some of us eventually and like us more. Will they ever love us? Probably not. Do I care? No, as long as they can't do anything to harm us. That's the factor. It's like this is what it is. Being Jewish is part of the game. Like, unfortunately, you know. So
I agree. I think that's kind of what was disappointed people about my vlog, right? Because they saw that I went to the countries, to some of these places, did positive videos, said nice stuff about them, showed interest in their religion, in their culture and whatever. But then when they asked me about Israel, they saw I wasn't budging, and then it was like, okay, it kind of brings me to that. I mean, if we're going back to me as a vlogger, right, which was what kind of makes me stand out maybe from a bunch of other talking heads out there in the in the space where there are a lot of everyone is has their say. You know, there's a lot going on, and people have their opinions and stuff. I can say definitely that as someone who traveled to those places, they were expecting to get the Israeli who is.
Oh, I lost you. I lost your
Brings.
mic. Your mic.
Yeah, I think I ran out of battery here on my earphone. I don't know if that's if you can hear me now, okay, or not. Probably
I
it's
hear
gonna be a
you.
bit of
It's
an
a
echo.
little, yeah, it's a little less quality, but it's okay. Don't worry about it.
Probably get a bit of an echo from the fact that I'm not looking into an earphone. But I'll just say that, yeah, I mean, this will be probably final point because, you know, we've been going back and forth here a long time. I just say that, yeah, you know, they wanted me to be, because I showed interest in the culture and the history and made the effort to travel, to then go and debase myself and say, well, you know, basically we in Israel are so extreme and so bad, but I'm not one of them. You know, I feel like that's kind of, if when I say you can't win like this or like this, right? You can't win by saying good things about the coexistence, and you can't win by pointing out the bad stuff. That's the third way that you win individually, but you don't make any effect, right? Which is to basically say, look, you're right, we're wrong, but not me. I'm one of the good, tolerant people, and then they'll like you more. But you know, you're not telling the truth. So um, I did go down that path, and that's why I don't have a huge following of people from these places, because they were disappointed in my outlook when they come into the live streams and stuff. They were disappointed that I didn't, you know, say that it's all about the settlements and it's all about Netanyahu and it's all about Zionism and it's all about like Saluki, kind of who you interviewed, right? Who goes down that route.
Did you like the episode, the first one? What did you think?
Sorry, can you hear me
The
well?
first episode. Can you hear me?
Which episode?
The meaning because I recorded 2 episodes with Saluki.
Oh, I didn't know. I don't remember. I saw. You know, I saw that episode, and I don't like too much talking about other people. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I can
that's
just
fine.
say
That's
that.
fine. No worries. No worries. No worries. Yeah, yeah.
No, no, it's okay. But I can't say. You know, I know the guy. He's a nice guy. I like him. I like hanging out with him. But I think he basically what he does is, yeah, he does kind of promote all of their talking points and so forth, and then they like him because he's showing kind of their side of things, but it's also the side of things that makes peace not really possible. Like the idea that it's all about the settlements, right? But not actually challenging people of whether they accept Tel Aviv or other places.
100%.
You know, the so yeah, I'm just
I,
saying, in the end of the day, that there is a way as an Israeli to be more liked by them, but that means basically submitting to their viewpoint, and in the long term, that's not helpful. And I
destructive.
think in
It's not
general
helping.
that a lot of the peace activists in Israel make this mistake, right? They try too hard to kind of make those concessions to them to show like, oh, we're bad, but I'm not, kind of thing, and oh, here, let me take in your perspective, and that doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work at all. It's some now there are some of them, some of these Palestinians, let's say in Ramallah, that actually are very peaceful, but large percentage of them I go, oh, what a useful idiot. We're gonna use you. Like, oh man, we're gonna we're gonna do a number on you. So anyway, Alec, thank you so much for joining. It's an absolute pleasure. Guys, thank you for watching. Make sure to check out Alec's content on the Insightful Nomad on Instagram, YouTube. Are there anywhere else? Twitter,
Yeah,
Facebook?
no, that's it. It was great hanging out. We had a long discussion, long back and forth, trying to unpack kind of unsolvable
Mhm.
problems that betters than us have not solved. But you know, we did our best. And yeah, I'd love to come back for another round of talks. So thank you so much for
It
having me.
would be a pleasure. I'd love to have you back on again. I hope we can meet in person at some point. I do want to make a trip to Israel in the near future. If you're ever in Miami for whatever reason, it would be awesome to get together. We'll grab a bite to eat. We'll hang out. Be awesome if we could even meet up with Tal as well. Maybe some other people. Just hang out together. Be a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a long episode. We're talking for 2 hours already, so the time really flew by. So really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. Guys, make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. If you have Patreon, buy me a coffee, any of that stuff, please feel free to throw it in. And I can also add the link in the description for people to support, to
Yeah,
send donations.
all the links are on my YouTube channel, Patreon, Instagram, and all that. So
No
you can see
problem.
it there, and hopefully I'll see
I'll
you
add that
guys
in.
over
I'll
there.
make sure to add them to the description. Ladies and gents, of course, real estate needs South Florida. Reach out to me, guys. This has been episode 222 of the Soothing Semantics podcast. Tune in every Tuesday to see more episodes. Until next time, peace.